Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hey everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. Joining me today is Gram Phillips, also known as Tupelo Lime. Hey Gram.
Hi, how are you? Nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm doing fantastic. I'm happy to have you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, early spring in the UK is not the finest weather in the world. But life is good here.
Yeah, I feel like in Pittsburgh at the moment, we get hot days and then we get the rain, and then it's just messing with my allergies, as you can maybe tell.
Yeah. But luckily, touring season is just about upon us, so it's okay.
Perfect. Well, I'm super excited to have you on today. We are going to be chatting all about live music and touring and much more. But before we get into all of this, can you share with the listeners a little about yourself and your musical journey?
Yeah. Hey y'all. I'm Gram Phillips. I'm an American citizen. I've been living in the UK for a long, long time. And I started out as a singer-songwriter. Um, Actually, I started out back in the day with punk bands, if we're really going to get into it. And out of that, when that all died off, I grew up into acoustic music and folk and country. That's when I discovered country, and eventually that turned into alt country, and that slowly turned into the kind of stuff I wrote. Um, and then I moved to the UK and realized that actually what I should be doing is bringing back all those roots from California that I'd really listened to back in the day. So I put together a band which we call Tupelo Lime, which is also my stage name solo. And we tour all over the UK and Europe right now.
Super awesome. Can you please explain the whole story behind choosing your stage name because it's super fantastic?
Thank you. Um, well, having spent a lot of time growing up in Maryland and being part of the South and having friends in Florida, Kentucky, Virginia, I wanted a name that reflected um, that Southern heritage. The stuff I write is about that wonderful mosaic that is the history of the United States. And I wanted to make sure that that included the Southland. So I wanted a, a, a thing that reflected the Southland. I think, there's nothing better than, you know, somewhere where Elvis was related to um, Tupelo. And then I was looking up all the variations of Tupelo, and it turns out there's a tree that grows out of Mississippi and Florida called the Tupelo Lime.
Oh,
Um, and I was like, that is a great band
that's
name,
so
y'all.
cool.
Yeah. And so that became sort of the overarching piece about what and it reflects very much the kind of music that both I play solo and we play in the band.
That is fantastic. Such a cool story.
Yeah, it took a while. I looked at all the variations of Tupelo. We looked at, and then found they were all taken. Tupelo honey and Tupelo this and Tupelo that, um, and then Tupelo lime just happened to be free, so um, I registered it and just used it. And yeah, it very much reflects the kind of stuff that we play.
Yeah, that's awesome too. And I think that, choosing a stage name, you had to be thoughtful about it. If you would have just picked the first thing, maybe you didn't put a whole lot of thought into it, then you would have been stuck with that name because the last thing you want to do is do something under one name and then change it 2 years later and change it again. So I think it's really awesome how you found something that felt so natural, even though it took some time.
That's exactly right, because, for I always looked at it from a sort of touring, gigging, working band point of view, and so whatever name it was had to draw people in as well as reflect what we did.
Absolutely. So you mentioned touring a couple times, so that's a perfect transition into our quote, which is about live music. So can you read that?
Yeah, this is by Dhani Jones, who is a great linebacker, and if I remember correctly, Eagles, Bengals, Saints linebacker, if I remember. Anyway, but he's also known for his interest in travel and art, and this is a great quote from him. There's nothing better than live music. It's raw energy, and raw energy feeds the soul.
This is an amazing quote. So when you were reading that, what was coming to your mind?
I mean, this is why we play, you know? We play as musicians who go out, 3, 4, 5 times a week. This is why we do this, is because it is what feeds our soul. I don't think being a musician is, um, a choice that you really have to make. It's just something you are. And because that's what you are, you need that live input.
I love that so much, and just from a concert fan, like, I love going to concerts. I was just at Carrie Underwood's concert and Kelsea Ballerini's concert, 2 of my favorite country artists, and you feel that energy. Just as a fan, as a listener of music, you can sit there for a very long time and listen to their songs on Spotify over and over and over, but when you're in a concert setting with that live music, with artists that you love or new artists you're just getting to know, when you have that in person live music setting, I have never walked out of a concert feeling bad. Like, it always brings
Exactly.
such a great energy from the audience standpoint, but from the musician side, I have to admit, and I've mentioned this before in, quite a few things that I've done, I prefer songwriting and recording to playing live, and I think that comes from being a classically trained musician. I had a
Mm.
lot of very high stress recitals and concerts growing up, all the way through college. And so I think from that whole experience, I have performance anxiety, and it's hard to sometimes
Oh, we
overcome
all
that.
get that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so I would rather prefer to write a song or record. But when I do play live, there is that beautiful energy from the performer side as well, sharing that live music with the audience.
Yeah, see, and I grew up very different, I grew up in, um well, my musical sort of stuff, if you like, was raised, in California with, Dead Kennedys and Flipper and Negative Trend and all the punk bands that came out the late '70s, early '80s, where it was all about the energy. Um, and art is about energy. Your music's just an art form. Art is if you go see, Jackson Pollock, or you go see one of the classic Renaissance artists, there's an energy in what they do as a even as a painter, you're almost a performer. It's just your performance is on canvas. Um, and your performance has to give that energy so that you get it back. And that is for me is the great thing. I always think, for example, oh, when I'm rehearsing, I forget lyrics and I forget chord changes. But once you go on stage, all of that disappears. The
Mhm.
first chord is terrifying. After that, you're okay.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I think too, like speaking about energy, it all comes down to emotion. And when you're performing, and like you said, with the other art forms too, every art is creativity and there's an emotion, a human experience at the heart of that, whether it be a song or a painting or whatever. And I think focusing on the energy that you're translating to the audience and the energy that everybody in the room at that live performance is experiencing, it's all tied to emotion. And when you're performing, especially, if you're singing a heartfelt song, you really want to translate the heartfelt emotion. If it's a feel good dance song, you want to get people feeling that high energy. And so I think it all comes down to the emotion as well and the emotion that you're putting into that energy while you're performing.
That is just so true. When you know, we do a sad song about loss and death, and, like all good country music, there has to be some of that involved in it somewhere. And really, you want people to be crying in the audience,
Yeah.
You want people to be breaking down, going, "Oh, I can't deal with it." And then when we play the really high, the much more rock stuff that we do, we want people to be like, fists in the air, pounding the floor. And ideally, we stage the sets so that we take people through a roller coaster of emotions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, before we dive more into the live music side of things, I'm really curious for you because you both release music and you perform live, but the styles of music that you record and share studio recordings is a little different than your band atmosphere that you bring with the live show. So, can you explain a little bit about both of them and how they're different, and also your decisions for why you went about doing the music that way on recordings versus live?
Yeah, so, the recording side of things is really very much we recording and the technology that recording allows us to do enables us to do really raw, stripped back music in which the lyrics are the true focus. And it's much more acoustic, you know. So in recordings, I play my acoustic guitar. Live, other than maybe one or two songs, I'm mostly in playing electric guitar. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is we want there to be a real difference and a real reason for people to come to the gigs. We want there to be a reason for people to go, I'm going to go see Tupelo Lime because I don't know what they're going to sound like this time. A bit like the Grateful Dead used to do, you know, and those other bands, Fish, and all those other jam bands. Um, and we are a jam band, much more live. You know, our songs that recording wise are maybe 6 or 7 minutes long. They can extend into 10, 11 minute songs on stage. Um, Lots of lead solo guitars. We've got a sax player, keyboard player. And we wanted people to have a reason to come to go, oh, I like the lyrics. I like the image. Now I want to go see them live. When they come to see us live, it's a different experience for them. It's not something they're sitting back and listening to. It's something that they are engaging with. Um, and that's the key rationale for the difference there. We really want, you know, it's a different mindset for the same audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's totally fascinating. I love that so much. And I completely relate with wanting to release music that really makes the lyrics and the melody shine and brings out a message. I have released quite a few now fully acoustic songs or songs that aren't overly produced. There's a couple that are just completely stripped back. But I'm more of like a pop country artist, so my songs are a little
Yeah,
more produced. But I do like to have those songs every once in a while that are fully stripped back because those are the ones that really bring out that raw emotion. And so making the decision to make those songs full acoustic has to do with what the song is about and my decision of that one would be more better acoustic. But I think it's really interesting for your purposes of, drawing people in from what you presented on those studio recordings and bringing an intrigue with, oh, I wonder what they're going to do with this live. Like if you have a whole band,
exactly.
it's a different vibe. And that's perfect because when I think of some of the concerts I've been to, Taylor Swift is coming to mind. When I went to her Reputation tour, there were a couple songs that she did fully acoustic that the studio recordings were fully produced, and it's just a whole different feel. And so I think when you deliver that on stage, bring in a different sound than the studio recording, it's fresh to the audience.
Absolutely, and you need to encourage, yeah, as an artist who tries to make an income here, you need to be able to encourage people to come to more than just one gig. And if you play the same stuff and the same style over and over again, they have no reason to come because they can just buy the recording and listen to it at home. And so we
Yeah.
play the same songs in radically different ways in different venues. Um, you know, so sometimes we do a song called Appalachia that um, when we record it is really dark and sad. And when we're playing it live this winter, it has become a almost a anthemic rock song.
Cool.
And it's much faster and it's much heavier and there's more pounding and there's more like stamping your feet type stuff. Um, but that might not always be the case. By the time we hit the summer, it might be somewhere in between. And we go on stage not knowing how we are going to sound beyond our basic sort of that Southern California Laurel Canyon stuff. Um, and we're driven by the drummer and the bass. And if they say, actually, I really feel like playing this a bit slower today, we end up doing the song slower.
That's awesome. And that kind of leads into another question I had for you. Since you are so free with the set list and your vibes when you're performing on stage, what is your rehearsal experience like?
Oh, our rehearsal spirits is very, very intense. I think
I bet.
being being a jam band, and this is what we primarily are live. We go off on tangents, and it's a bit like jazz. In order to be able to do that, you have to have a really secure place to be able to come back to. Because if you do not have that, it just descends into a mess. And so, a lot of our rehearsal time is working on really small detail, like there's too much keyboard in that bar, or that phrase on the sax sounds just the same as the phrase you played like 3 bars before. or all that sort of stuff where we're trying to put stuff together so we can craft around that that then allows us to go off and to change rhythms within the same song. And we can only do that if we're really focused in rehearsal on having that space that we can act as an anchor that we can all go back to.
That is fascinating, and I think that also shows just a bond between band members because in order for you to get so detailed and sometimes improvise in the middle of shows with, let's make this slower, let's make this faster,
Yeah,
you need to have a connection in order to do that. I couldn't imagine working with band members I didn't fully understand or connect with or resonate with and be able to make such changes and so detailed,
yeah.
things in the songs in order to make that happen.
And that's band politics is the hardest part about a band. This is the third iteration of Tupelo Lime that I put together. This is the one that works. Um, I tried two before with different musicians, um, and it was okay. But I met Marty, who's my lead guitar, Marty Mayhem, um, a few years back, and about 18 months ago, we started talking about doing some work together. Um, and we finally ended up getting together, and all of a sudden, we just, it's just one of those things when we're sitting down in my front room, and we're just, yeah, that works, right, great. We didn't have to think about what each other was doing, and then we found a bass player that we could gel with, and as a band, we gelled instantly, and that enables us to not have to listen out for those changes. I know when Marty is gonna go from, arpeggio to crunch overdriven electric guitar without even thinking about it, that I can just feel it. So
Uh-huh.
when he hits that first crunch chord, I'm already there with him. And that is really important to a band, especially one that aims to be a working sort of touring, gigging band. You have to have that, otherwise it just falls apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though I've never had a band, I'm relating to what you're saying from the songwriter producer
Yeah,
relationship because I
absolutely.
work very closely and hard with my producer, and we have this connection that it's like we'll say the same thing at the same time and half the time when we're like producing stuff we're talking about it but there's not extensive conversation because we're basically reading each other's minds and he gets me I get him and so I think no matter what aspect of music you're looking at, whether it be with the production and the recording or the performing live with a band, you need to have those connections because music is such a vulnerable art and it's such a creative art and it's a living art. So you need to have that connection with others.
Absolutely, and the reason you're making the music, be it for recording or for rehearsal or for live or, you're making a single or an album, that's actually irrelevant. I think you're right, you have to have that connection with your co-writers, your co-musicians,
Yeah.
for it to work in any kind of format.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been playing live for quite a while and doing it so often. So I'm sure you've had experiences where you learned lessons and you've grown over the years. So what are some of the main takeaways from performing live that you would like to share to other musicians who are maybe just getting started playing live or need some guidance?
So, the first thing is everybody gets stage fright, no matter where they are at in their career. I mean, it just everybody gets stage fright. Um, all you have to do is learn how to channel that. The second thing is when you're playing live to an audience and you make a mistake, 99.99% of the audience will never know. So it's okay. You just carry on. Um, when we mess up a chord and we come off stage, or even during when we're rehearsing, go, you know, oh, I went to a D instead of an E, and it's like, yeah, we hear about it and we get really frustrated about it. But when when someone else is listening to it, they go, I don't hear that. Like, yeah, okay, but we do. Um, and so you need to be able to just go with it and go, it's okay. People go to live music not to hear a recorded track. They go to live music to see a human being play music, and that includes making the odd mistake. So it's cool to make mistakes. You see the Stones or you see the Foo Fighters. constantly making mistakes. And you see the band look over each other and they smile because, they know that they've made that wrong chord change right there, but nobody else has noticed. So that's the second thing. The third thing I think is you do not need to spend a huge, if you want to be a live gigging musician and you want to go to an open mic and you're beginning, you do not need to spend a huge amount of money on your kit. Most gigging touring musicians that I know are not, unless they're very rich and very famous, are not gigging with custom shop Fender American made Strats. They are gigging with something that costs them a few $100s that if they're in a bar or a venue and it gets covered in beer, you know what? It's okay. Having said that, I do gig with a custom shop Gibson now these days as my acoustic. But my main tool is a Jet Stratocaster with some modified pickups that maybe were 350 to $400. Um, because actually, just like making mistakes, audience doesn't really know the difference. The sound that you're making is much more important than how you're making it. I think that's a key message for, I meet so many. There's a vibrant emerging music scene here on the east coast of the UK, and there's so many of these young emerging musicians get hung up on the tech and the kit, and it's like just go out and make music, man. Don't worry about it. Nobody will care. What they
Yeah.
care is that you make music.
Such great advice. I really resonate with number 2, the making mistakes. I think the whole reason why I am, more shy when it comes to performing is because of my classical education. When I played, I was graded. I think from being in such a heavy grading situation where my instrument's piano, so I play like very complex classical piano pieces. That's what I was graded on. And so sometimes, even though I'm out of that and I'm not in school anymore getting graded like that, I feel like because of how intense it was, that mindset still stays a little with me. So when I make little mistakes, it's like the end of the world.
Yeah, and individually inside yourself, you come out of a rehearsal, you go, "Man, I really messed that up." I am not a great guitarist. I am at best a middling guitarist, at the very best. But somehow, what I do pleases people,
Yeah.
and that's much more important than how I do it. The fact is that I am doing it is what is pleasing people, and that's the piece that keeps driving you forward. And if you ask all the really good musicians and the really even the hyper famous ones, they do it because they are pleasing people. They're not worried too much about the how they're doing it. What they're doing is they're just doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, super inspirational. Thank you for that. So, I wanted to hear if you had any super fun stories from touring.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's really funny. So, obviously, like just about everywhere else in the world, there were massive lockdowns here, which ended 2021, the spring of 2021. So by the summer of 21 and 22, I was starting to tour Europe again solo because the band was, everybody had COVID and it was still difficult to try and put people together and the venues weren't fully operating. A lot of venues had closed, a lot of bands had given up. So I was doing a sort of a short tour of Germany. I think I did about 10 days. And I was in Stuttgart and I was scheduled to play in this bar in Stuttgart. And as it happens, Ramstein, I don't know if you've heard of Ramstein.
No, I haven't.
Right. Okay. So Ramstein are one of the biggest sort of heavy metal bands in Europe. They're a German band. They sing in German for the most part.
Oh, cool.
And they are sort of almost like a Viking heavy metal band. Really, really good at that. They are awesome at it. Um, and the night after I was doing my first sort of European tour night, um, in what it had been 3 years or something, um, they were playing in the same city, and, it was packed. They hadn't played in, like, 2.5 years, so the all Rammstein fans from around Germany are coming to the city, and I'm playing in this little bar, and, I suddenly realized it's packed with heavy metal Rammstein fans, and I am playing acoustic solo dark country, and I was like, "Man, this is just not gonna go well." Um, and I tell you what, though, the great thing is, I started at about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I played the first song, and my first song, I usually do I do this sort of Spanish influence thing, um, just as because I say to people I'm a country musician, and then I do a flamenco style guitar, which really messes with people's head, which I enjoy. Um, by the end of that song, I had this whole packed bar of heavy metal Rammstein fans just working with me and going and enjoying having a great time. And I ended up there for like 4 hours gigging there with them and talking with them and chatting with them and I did a few covers. "Oh, yeah, do some Stones." And what I learned is that heavy metal, and I sort of knew this, but heavy metal fans love music. They're not genre specific about music. They love classical music. They love any kind of live music. And there was a big German guy called Mouse. Turns his name was Mouse, which is a German cartoon, and he was enormous. And he come up and he said, "I love handmade music." I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." After that night, and I finished about 1 in the morning, turns out they're having a house party down the road, and, they said, "Oh, why don't you come and play at the house party down the road?" So next thing I know, I'm in this German farmhouse on the outskirts of Stuttgart,
Oh my
um,
god.
with about 30 heavy metal fans who are by then very, very drunk, and they want me to play acoustic music, and I'm like, "Oh, man." So I ended up crawling out of there about 6 in the morning.
Oh
Yeah.
my god, that's such
It
a
was a great
perfect
night.
story.
It was a great, great night. I goes and so then they invited me back in 2022. I
Oh
went back
my
and played the same
gosh.
bar. Um, so it was kinda cool. But yeah, that was one of the best nights I've had in the last, like, 2 years because it was just such a surprise.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I think the big takeaway is when those fans walked in, you could have completely went in a shell and shut off and been terrified, "Oh my god, they're gonna hate me, this is gonna suck, oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
god," but you
yeah.
made the best of the situation, and I think that shows a lot that when you're on the road, sometimes you can't I've never
You just
toured,
do
but
what
I'm
you
sure
gotta
you
do,
do what you
man.
do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta keep on keeping on, to use one of the '70s things, you know? And you do what you do, and you know what? There have been times when people have not really enjoyed some of the stuff. My solo stuff's really dark, even though it's the same song. It's really dark. And there are times when people have, I don't like that. And that's okay. I don't mind if people don't like it. Um, I mind if people don't have an opinion of it. I mind that much more. I'd much rather have a discussion with someone who says, "You know what? I didn't like that." And I'm like, "That's cool. It's not for everybody." You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Graham, it was lovely having you on. This has been super fun, super
Yeah,
entertaining.
I've had a great time. Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome having you. So, before we go, I just wanted to hear from you. Other than everything that you've mentioned during this conversation, what are some of your all time favorite things about live music and being a touring musician?
The number one thing is that I can do it. No matter everything else that goes on in the world, a like I said, I'm a mediocre, middling guitarist, but actually, I'm a damn good songwriter. Um, and the fact is that I am allowed to take my craft and my art and share it with people is the biggest thrill and the biggest drive in my life. And I couldn't do that if I wasn't touring and gigging. And touring and gigging allows me, and busking, as well, 'cause I did busk in Germany when I was there. Um, that allows me to, um, release all that stuff I have in my head, all those lyrics that wander around in my head and the chord changes and stuff. And I am so honored. I am both honored and humbled to be able to do that, while at the same time, I try and tell stories about, as I said at the beginning, the mosaic that is the history of America, and that includes the bad things that happened as well. And I particularly um, care about what's happened to the people who've served our country the most. And so I try and portray them in a light that encourages other people to understand the world that they live in. And being touring and gigging musician has allowed me to do that, for which I am, as I say, both honored and humbled.
Beautiful. That's absolutely amazing, Graham. It was lovely having you on. So much inspiration from you, so many great stories, such great advice. So, where can everyone find you online, check out your music, and find upcoming tour dates?
So, Facebook, obviously, is we have a website, tuplolime.com. We are in the midst of booking all the tours. I think we're doing Norway and Eastern Europe this year. So the gig dates aren't up there yet, but they will be in a couple of weeks. So tuplolime.com. We have the raw stripped back EP, which is called Roanoke. It's on Bandcamp. You look under Tupelo Lime. And we are all over Facebook as Tupelo Lime. Connect with us, engage, send messages, speak, chat, send pics, send videos, have conversations with us on Facebook. Social media is there's lots of downsides to it. The one thing it does do is enables you and I to have conversations 1,000 miles apart,
Yeah.
and I really like that. So, we're quite open to people messaging us and saying, "Hey, can you do this? Can you play this?" Um, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for joining me. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation all about live music with Tupelo Lime. And of course, until next time,
Stay
stay right
right
on
on
track.
track.